Hello and welcome. Today we begin with sociological analysis, and I'll cover one of the founding figures of sociology, the legacy of Max Weber in his two-volume set of Economy and Society. This is really the ultimate legacy of Max Weber distilled into these two volumes here, into this massive tome work on sociological categorization, sociological unit analysis of economy, society, religion, etc., etc. The thesis is that Weber does a broad sweep across history, civilizations, and cultures to produce a sociological typologies of authority, economy, and sociological unit. Sociological unit being class, station, role, vocation, etc., etc. Here we are delivered classical categories of sociology, analysis of economy and religion, as well as monumental archetypes of authority, power, and dominance. All of this is included within Weber's work, Economy and Society. It was his life's work culminating in this large magnum opus, Economy and Society. Even more than the Spirit of Capitalism was quite a small work compared to what I'm presenting here. But point one, scientifically, sociology is empirical and must establish cause-effect relationship between units of analysis. Weber believed this more than anything. He was an empiricist. He was a scientist. He believed that any sociologist worth their salt should establish cause-effect relationships between their units of analysis. So if sociologists were to say that the nation state as a unit is responsible for modern warfare, they would have to establish a cause-effect relationship between nation state and warfare. If they believed that the family unit, the nuclear family, was the cause of eatable dysfunction, then they would have to establish a cause-effect relationship to establish that empirically. Remember, Weber is trying to found a science here, and he believed that he partook of science as well as historical readings of history and sociology. So scientifically, sociology is empirical and must establish cause-effect relationship between units of analysis and the effects in the world that the sociologist deems them to have. Point two, Weber says this in the book, or I think he says it in this work, I'm not sure, it might be in some other work, but he says, you don't have to be Caesar to understand Caesar. You don't have to be, so a figure like Julius Caesar, you don't have to be Julius Caesar to understand Julius Caesar. You can observe his behavior from outside, from the external point of view, from a parallax point of view. Each individual around him can observe him, and you as a sociologist can observe a figure, a leader like, let's say, Stalin or Hitler or Julius Caesar, and you can understand them by their behavior, by their external output of behavior, and by analyzing their sociological categories, their family, their nation, their associations, their corporate ties, etc., etc. You don't have to be Caesar. This is a famous Weberian quote. You don't have to be Caesar to understand Caesar. Point three, he establishes a typology of authority, three types of authority: rational, legalistic, traditional, and charismatic. The rational, legalistic type of authority is where we all live in today, the liberal democracies. Developed liberal democracies live in a rational, legalistic order. All of our laws are supposedly established by rationality. Our constitutions are established by rationality. The laws have to be proved in a court of law. They have to be upheld by a court, but it has to be linked to reasoned argument. It's not established by oppressive. You may have a Marxist lean and say that it's actually established by class interests. But actually, society today is rational, legalistic in the manner that Weber meant it to mean. He said, what did he say? He says, when there's a range of rules that you have to cover, that covers the whole operation of society, all throughout society, that is the rational, legalistic category. We, with our Constitution, with our living Constitution and our established Constitution, and the laws that we live under every day, the municipal laws, provincial laws, federal laws, this is all a rational, legalistic order, and this produces a bureaucracy as well, which I may get to down below. But rational, legalistic order produces democracy. Then there's traditional. So rational, legalistic, traditional, charismatic. Traditional is how most of humans have lived in history. The Chinese emperor was a traditional authority. The Russian Tsar was a traditional authority. The French Louis XIV was a traditional authority. They ruled by tradition, by the custom, the solidified custom of their country, the solidified social relations and corporate relations of their country. And traditional society has to be, Weber thinks, can be overthrown by the third type, which is charismatic authority. So a figure like Stalin or Hitler ruled, or Lenin, ruled by charismatic authority. Many presidents, U.S. presidents, have also ruled by it's the primary movement of presidential rule is charismatic authority. Whoever's most charismatic wins the presidential seat, or whoever's most charismatic attains power. And I'll get this further down below what the operation of charismatic authority is. But charismatic authority is revolutionary, and it depends on the spoils of war, so to speak. It is charismatic authority is both it's usually set against traditional, or in the case of Hitler, against rational legalistic orders. But remember, Weimar Germany was very young when Hitler took over, so it was a rational legalistic order, but it was very young. So Hitler was against both the rational legalistic order and against President von Hindenburg, which would be more of a traditional type of society. But usually charismatic authority is revolutionary, so it overthrows traditional authority. So those are the three types of authority: rational, legalistic, which we all live under today in the developed world; traditional, and charismatic. And to some degree, every political leader is charismatic, right? So there's a gradation across the lines that clearly separate these typologies. Point 4, the capitalist economy divides into status classes: property class, commercial class, and social class. So as we know, since capitalism's inception, perhaps 500 years ago, with the burghers living in the towns and the cities, there arose property classes who were defined by how much property they owned. Simple, that's a Marxian observation, but Weber carries this forward. It's a property class. Then there's a commercial class. So there's, you know this in our own society, trust fund kids are a part of a property class. They're elevated because they own property. But there's also a commercial class, and they're different. Commercial and property are different. Commercial class is the vocation that you have. So maybe the trust fund kid's father has this commercial class. It's defined by your vocation. Your commercial class is defined by your vocation. And finally, there's of course social class, which is a combination of your charisma, vocation, and property. Probably all mixed into one, into the social class. So as Marx would design, there's the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, and that would be the social class. Point 5, this is a line in the book that really struck me because I'm part of a Baptist church, and I mentioned this to the minister's son. It's very amusing what it says: in every congregation there must develop a rational metaphysic and a religious ethic. And this is to me this was hugely profound. In every congregation there must develop a rational metaphysic and a religious ethic. So I think it's the preacher's job to establish the ethic of the whole congregation, but it's up to the individuals to establish what does this mean for a rational metaphysic. What does ethics, and I'll get into another video about ethics and metaphysics, but what does this ethical call mean for me metaphysically, in my being, the seat of my being and my soul, and my place in nature and society? What does this mean? In every congregation there must develop a rational metaphysic and a religious ethic. Very important. So rational metaphysic is what we're trying to establish on this channel, right? We're trying to establish a coherent system. So I like to think in systems, and that's probably why I like Immanuel Kant and Max Weber so much, is because they think in systems. And Jordan Peterson thinks in systems. Zizek finally laid out his system. But I like to think in systems. I'm the opposite of Nietzsche. I don't like Nietzsche's philosophizing with a hammer. I prefer systems. But a rational metaphysic is your ontology, your theory of being in nature. Very important. And examples of this are the ancient Iranian priests, the Magi. That's where we get the term magic, is from ancient Iranian priests. Jewish law, eschatology, and Reformation economic drive. As you know from The Spirit of Capitalism, Weber's his most famous work probably, the Reformation economic drive, the Reformation created a whole new economic drive, a modern economy as we know it today. But point 6, charismatic authority, one moment. Charismatic authority is I mentioned this before. Charismatic authority is revolutionary, depends on the spoils of war, and evolves into bureaucratic authority or rule. So you can observe this with the Third Reich. Hitler takes over by charismatic authority. It's revolutionary. He even tried to cause it by an armed coup, right? So the same man that tried to take over the country with an armed coup became the absolute ruler of that country through charismatic authority. So he was revolutionary. He subverted, even though Zizek doesn't think he's revolutionary, that he kowtowed to the old guard of the German army and the corporatists and whatnot. Hitler really did. It was revolutionary that he just overrode all the existing power structure. And it depends on the spoils of war. So Hitler couldn't have survived if he. For people that say if Hitler could have lived fat on the hog if he did not declare war on the world, that's not true. He wouldn't have. His regime probably wouldn't have survived in peacetime, right? Just like Churchill was kicked out right after the war. Churchill was kicked out because he was not fit for being a peacetime leader. Hitler was not fit for being a peacetime leader. Stalin, it's hard to say whether he was or not because he had strife all through his rule. But charismatic authority is revolutionary, spoils of war, evolves into bureaucratic authority or rule. So once Hitler takes power, slowly, through time, he develops his corporate structures, and this is true of all charismatic authority, and bureaucracy takes over and solidifies underneath of charismatic authority. So charismatic authority is initially revolutionary, depends on the spoils of war, but then evolves into bureaucratic authority or rule. So rule by bureaucracy, as Max Weber, and I think, did he invent the term bureaucracy? I think he did. Which means rule from an office, rule from an office. That's what bureaucracy means. And Weber established a charismatic authority evolves into bureaucratic authority. So once Hitler was established, he created all these ministries around him that managed the country. And there's no further point from his biography I'm reading about Hitler that says in Germany they had this principle called working towards the Fuhrer. So if you were a German nationalist socialist, you had to think, how do I work towards Hitler? How do I work towards Hitler such that he would be pleased with my actions? And that produced a lot of the aggregate action that supported and undergirded Hitler's regime. But point 7, the development of leadership of ruling structures typically goes from the straight line from patriarchy to feudalism to despot. From patriarchy, so that's a type of traditional authority. Patriarchy is based on your father, based on even the kinship ties of the clan system in Scotland or the tribal system anywhere else. That's based on patriarchy. We still technically live under a patriarchy where most of the positions of power are occupied by men. And that's not a bad thing, by the way. But feudalism goes from patriarchy to feudalism, where the ties become more economic and tied to the land and tied to the landlord-tenant relationship. And finally, we get to despot at the end. Figures like the Middle Eastern despots like Stalin, who was the penultimate despot of history. Joseph Stalin. Well, point 8, we get to the distinction between polis and versus burg, city as a fortress market. So a polis is a city that is run as a single political unit. A burg is more commercial. And the burghers, as bourgeoisie was, the word bourgeoisie was developed from the word burger, which meant these town dwellers in Germany. Polis is a functioning high resolution of leadership, and burg is a decentralized, dissipated commercial rule. And the city, and as Weber mentions, the city developed initially as a fortress market. So a market develops and it needs to protect itself, so it develops a fort around itself. So the city was initially as a fortress market, so that's why there's town squares. And there used to be walls around cities, but there's town squares in the center and they're protected by the rest of the city around them. Appendix, this will be the only appendix, but Appendix 1, the custom, common law, and civil law. Weber goes through these traditions or these practices one by one, but he says there's custom develops in the common law or civil law. Usually common law. Common law arises out of custom. Civil law is almost imposed from the top down. But there's custom And this is what defines a nation or a group of people, or as Alexander Dugin says, a narod, a civilization, nation, or religion. Custom defines what a people is. I think Alexander Dugin says that custom language and, what does he say? Custom language and shared history is what develops a people, a narod, as he calls it in Russian. Weber wouldn't disagree with that. He would be the first to say this. He says custom develops into common law and civil law, and that defines a narod or a people. He didn't use the word narod, obviously, but he said a people is defined by custom, common law, civil law. So that's it for today. Hopefully that was good for you as a whirlwind tour through. There's many more lines in the book than what I've covered here, but this is what I found to be most compelling in the work, was this line of all these different episodes within the book itself. So I hope that's good for you. I'll make more videos in the future. Take care. Till next time. Bye-bye.